إلا أن يشاء الله وأذكر ربك إذا نسيت وقل عسى أن يهديني ربي لأقرب من هذا رشدا. Suratul-Kahfi, Surah number 18, ayat number 24. Illa, except, and that, yasha'a Allahu, Allah wills. Wa, and, uzkur, remember, Rabbaka, your Lord, either when, nasita, you forget. Wa, and, kul, say, asa, maybe, an, that, yahdiyani Rabbi, my Lord will guide me. Li, to, aqraba, closer, min, than, haza, this, rashadan, a rightly guided way. But we need to now understand the flow of the translation, right? So, illa, except, an yasha'a Allahu, ay yasha Allahu, ay yasha Allahu, is an yasha'a Allahu. That means that Allah wills. Now, just one point I want to say is when you read the translations, the translators or the scholars have translated it as if Allah wills, which is the translation of inshallah, inshaAllahu. But the term used over here is not inshaAllahu, but is an yasha'a Allahu. It's different. So we cannot, if something we have heard and which we use in common everyday usage, we cannot substitute for that when the choice of words used in the text is different. That's not allowed. That's wrong. And okay, someone translating it could have made a mistake, but multiple translations having the same mistake is sort of, what should I say, sort of fishy. So, okay, so now you could clarify that. What is the intent of this? And the intent I had mentioned in connection with the previous verse also, that we need to discuss verse number 23 and verse number 24 together, when it was saying that don't say, I mean in simple terms, it is don't say that I'm going to do that tomorrow. So in continuation of that, don't say I'm going to do that tomorrow, except that Allah wills, except that which Allah wills, what Allah wills, or whatever Allah wills, that will happen. So if Allah wills and I intend to do something tomorrow, then that will happen. So that is what is meant. So we can clarify that. That is by saying inshallah. So except that Allah wills, in brackets we can clarify what is the intent of this statement. That is by saying inshallah. But so this, I mean, substituting the text with whatever you want to substitute it with, that's simply, it's unacceptable. Okay. And then it says, wa uzkur, it's together, you can read it, wazkur, that's fine. Wazkur rabbaka, that's fine. But let's break it up for our grammatical analysis. Wa and uzkur is do zikr, but okay, remember is a good enough translation for this iteration. Rabbaka, your Lord, and remember your Lord. Now, idha is when, nasita is you forget. Now, what does it mean, and remember your Lord when you forget? When you forget, how can you remember your Lord? So what is happening is, make a conscious effort to do the zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do that. That is your Lord. That means what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when you forget, what happens? Whenever you remember back, I mean, it's not possible. It's simply not possible because we are all human beings. It's simply not possible. It's human tendency. Though it is better for us if we are always conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's best, that's ideal, that's the optimal state. But that cannot be achieved. We are human beings, we are deficient beings. So, okay, while it is true that we should be conscious of Allah and we should do dhikr of Allah, it may happen that we may forget. So Allah agrees, I mean attests to that can happen. So if that happens, whenever you remember back, then do dhikr of Allah. And do zikr of Allah is more profound than this remembering Allah. I'll explain that. So, but you've understood this. Otherwise, it is meaningless. And remember Allah when you forget. When you forget, how can you remember? It's precisely the situation where you cannot remember actually. At other times you may. So when you forget and remember, but that is implied. That's why I put it in brackets. It's not there. It's part of rhetorics. You may say, how can I insert words? I'm not inserting words. These are balagha, these are rhetorics. And rhetorics is how a language is used, and you need to have a deep sort of relationship with the language to be able to appreciate that. That usage is absolutely fine. But the translation, different languages work different in different ways. The mechanisms are different for different languages. But in English, if you just leave it that literal word-to-word translation, the essence is getting lost over here. So that needs clarification. So when you forget, okay, you can forget, and you remember back. Whenever you remember back, what should you do? You should do zikr of your Lord. So zikr and remember your Lord is a simple translation, and do zikr of your Lord will sort of imply the primary meaning, which is remember. I agree with that. But a secondary meaning of sort of understand, remember and understand your Lord. So understanding your Lord is not easy. So at least try and attempt to understand your Lord. So that is what is meant over here. And then we proceed and kul say. Asa is, I've translated maybe. Now this is a bit tricky. I'll not go into the intricacies because I'm not trying to deal with the English language as such. Okay, maybe you've understood what I'm trying to suggest. People have used other words which are sort of okay when we read the English translation. For example, hopefully or perhaps or possibly. All of those are okay translations, but maybe the way I have translated it is better. I don't want to waste too much time more on this, the usage or choice of my words. Why? Because that would be going into an English language analysis, which I don't want to do. So maybe, that, Yahdiyani Rabbi. Yahdiyani is the verb. There is an attached pronoun ni attached with it, which is me, so guide me. But Rabbi is the subject of that verb. So Rabbi will be translated first in the English language. Rabbi, Rabbu plus he is the attached pronoun over there. My Lord. Maybe that my Lord will guide me. And there is, how should I say it? So Yahdiyani, it's noon kasra and then ya is not there. It's shortened. So there is an eagerness. There is an eagerness working with me as a part of this dua actually. Right? Because we are being told to say this. So there is an eagerness. That is where we are just trying to reach to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as soon as possible. So how do I even capture that? Maybe I could have used an exclamation mark, but then the sentence itself is not complete. So I put a comma over there. So these are some of the deficiencies that we'll have to be with in the English language. But I'm trying to explain those as we are proceeding. So, and say, maybe that my Lord will guide me. Now, this part will become very sort of stop and start. So we'll do that stop and start translation before we make you explain that in a little bit more detail. Li is to. Akraba is af'ala, af'alu. Allahu akhbaru, af'alu, that pattern. And li is causing it to be in the jar state. So af'ala pattern. The meaning remains the same. It's the comparative form. Not adjective, but comparative form of the adjective, right? So closer, not close, closer. To closer. Min haza is than this. To closer than this. Rashadan, a rightly guided way. To closer than this, a rightly guided way does not sound English. It is not English. So we need to understand. To something of a closer way. To something of a closer way. So there is a way. I'm walking on the way. But because I made a mistake by forgetting to say inshallah, right? So what are we being advised? To maybe that my Lord will guide me to something of a closer way. So li akraba, to something of a closer way. Min haza, even than this. So even if I'm on a rightly guided, even if I'm on a way which is a sort of rightly guided way, so more closer, sort of the closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is being suggested over here. So we can be close to Allah, we can be closer to Allah. So in that sense, min haza, even than this, if we are already on the right track, even then we can still make this dua. How beautiful. Even than this. To Rashadan is a rightly guided way, but in the free flow running translation, we have to say to a more rightly guided way. So we are on a way, but to a more rightly guided way. Make this dua fantastic. And say maybe that my Lord will guide me to something of a closer way, even than this, to a more rightly guided way. Now, why I emphasize this so many times is because who is being referenced to in these two verses? It is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if we think about that, if we pause and think about that, reflect on that, what is happening? Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said something, and he forgot to say inshallah, and now he is being caught hold with a very strong language. Hey, don't you ever dare to say such a thing, that I'm going to do that tomorrow, except that Allah wills. Except by you saying inshallah, when you're intending to do something and you're saying that I'm going to do something tomorrow, you say inshallah, I'm going to do that tomorrow, inshallah. So we forget inshallah. I mean, it's not even a sin. It's not even a crime, but it's not even a mistake. It's a lapse, I could say. But even then, because the stature of the Prophet is so great, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for even minor lapses, he is being held accountable with a very severe language by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says, and that's why I emphasize the last part of this ayat. It says, okay, so you forget, that can happen with you. But whenever you remember me back, do zikr of me. Allah is saying, do zikr, remember me, understand me. Understanding me is not possible in its entirety, in a holistic manner, in its whole. So at least try and attempt to do that. Okay. And say, maybe that if I were to do that, if I forget and whenever I remember back, I do zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and say, if I were to do that, then what is happening? Maybe that my Lord will guide me. So is Muhammad not guided? He is. But to be more guided, to be more conscious of Allah, the gradation, the degree of consciousness can increase. So that's what is being suggested. Maybe that my Lord will guide me to something of a closer way, even than this, to a more rightly guided way. He's already on the right path. So this is primarily being addressed to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He is being held accountable, but the message is intended for us. The message is not primarily intended for him. The message is intended for us, right? Through his example, he is being held accountable. But the primary object or addressees are us, and especially in Akhiruz Zaman, because Surah Kahf is for Akhiruz Zaman. And one more thing. So that's why I was emphasizing this. So is he not guided? Is he not on the right way already? He is. He is guided. He is on the rightly guided way already. But he's saying maybe that my Lord will guide me to something of a closer way, even than this, to a more rightly guided way. And when you read that with that background information in mind, with that background context in mind, then it sounds so much more humbling. And that's what we are supposed to do. So now there is a historical context of revelation, Asbab al-Nuzul, for these two verses. The historical context of revelation is, I think, the right word to say it. So what happened was, the story I said that, and generally also we are all aware of that story, that the Quraysh when the Prophet ﷺ claimed prophethood, so the Quraysh wanted to, test that claim. So they went to the Jews of Medina, and the Jews told them, ask him 3 questions, and one of the 3 questions was related to the al-Kahfi. And okay, so they asked the 3 questions, and Prophet ﷺ, it was so happening for the last few days, the last few nights specifically, Jibreel al-Islam would frequent him with revelations. So he thought, when he was having this discussion with the Quraysh, the delegation, during the daytime, he thought, okay, so when at night time Jibreel al-Islam will come down with more verses or more revelation, then I would ask him this question and I'd get to know the answer from him. So that was the thought process. Is it really wrong? No, not really wrong, because for the last few nights that was the practice, that was what was happening. So that was a natural assumption for him to have. No harm done. But just that he forgot to say inshallah. And Allah wanted this to act as a reminder for us in Akhiruz Zaman. And because of this lapse, you said I'm going to tell that tomorrow, I'm going to narrate the story tomorrow. Do it then. Do it. Go ahead, do it. And for the next 15 or so nights, next 2 weeks, a fortnight or half a month, 15 nights or 16 nights or whatever, Jibreel al-Islam did not visit him. And imagine the embarrassment that he had to face, and the Muslim Ummah as a whole, a handful of followers at that time as a whole had to face that he claims to be a true prophet and he cannot even answer, and he said, I'm going to answer that tomorrow. So it would have been a great embarrassment. But even then, how could you omit? How could you not say inshallah? Such a difficult test Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is putting him through, and a handful of Muslims through. So this is very profound in that sense. Now, let us also relate this to the practice that we have in Akhir Zaman. How easily, how frivolously we use the term inshallah. More specifically, inshallah means if you intend something and you say inshallah, you have to put in every conscious effort to make that happen. Because Allah is now wanting and you have intended. So you cannot just walk in the opposite direction. No, that's not allowed. So, but how do we use it? Precisely in this day and age, the usage of it's not even forget about using inshallah. It's not even a misuse. It's an abuse of the term inshallah. So you will see people saying inshallah specifically when they don't have an intention to do something the next day or whenever, and someone has asked them to do something, the same thing. They don't have the intention. That means they're not going to do it, and they use the word inshallah. It's an abuse. And on the day of judgment, if you are held accountable for this, and for this reason, instead of you making it to heaven, you end up in hellfire, don't be surprised. Don't take it lightly. Inshallah is a very grave statement. Give it its due respect. You don't have any intention, say that openly. If you're being told to do something, and if you either don't have an intention or you think you cannot make it, don't say inshallah. Clarify that I don't think it will be possible. You're being told to do something, or you're being asked something, and you know it's not going to happen, and you have no intention to make it happen, and then you say inshallah. It's basically you're using it to degrade Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a derogatory sense, even without realizing it. So it's very important for all of us to be conscious about this message as well, and hope we remember this, because this is Akhir Zaman, and in Akhir Zaman what will happen, and this practice is so widespread, so prevalent, that it's really a shame on us. Collectively, the Muslim Ummah is so ignorant and not focusing, not aligning themselves with the true, essence of Islam. It's a very sad state of affairs. So we'll continue with the next few verses, and we'll see how the story proceeds.